Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You're about to see episode 2 of my Twisted Metal Let's Play, and it would be episode 3, but you know how you push the button to start, to get into video recording mode, and then you push it again to start recording? Yeah, some lessons you have to learn the hard way. So, this time you're actually seeing what I'm doing, and I'm going to be redoing the New York map. Indeed, when I said that this entire game is set in California, I completely forgot about this map. It has snow, it has elevated railways, it has the Statue of Liberty, I think in the right place. I've never actually been to New York City, so I don't know, but definitely not California. It's the only map I can think of that could definitely not be in California, which is odd. Why would you have one map that's not in that place? I guess they just wanted the visual variety that comes with snow. Anyway, before we get into this match, I want to point something out about the design of these vehicles. You'll see, like this car, which has just this, the windshield busted out, and half of it is covered in an armor plate that's just a slit. It looks kind of like an eye patch, doesn't it? It makes it look asymmetrical. And when it comes to character design, whether we're talking people or vehicles, asymmetry it's a sign that something is twisted, not quite right. And here, this ambulance is supposed to be pretty. It's this Art Deco 1950s style ambulance, but the red lights on top are blinking. They invoke, twitching or stuttering eyeballs. And because they're red, that makes them look more sinister. It's not like the Mars light on top, which is constantly on, it's just going around. Those lights are blinking and they don't look like they should be. And the windows in the back are not windows, they're grating. Why would they be grating? There's a ramming bumper welded onto the front for what we have to assume is a very, very evil reason, and the whole thing is muddy and scratched up, which makes it look untrustworthy. Why would an ambulance be in such poor shape? Look here, and again we see armor bolted on, we see grating instead of windshield, and it says the extermination experts on the side, which people would probably let that slide if this weren't a Twisted Metal game, but since it is, we know exactly what that car does. And again, a slitted armor plating on the side of a hearse, which looks very untoward and untrustworthy, sort of Venetian blind metal on the windshield of this car. And my personal favorite example is, of course, the police car. Now, police SUVs tend to have rounded corners. They look very reassuring, kind of like the vehicle equivalent of a mama bear. This thing has lots of hard lines and lots of hard angles, and again, you see armor slits and grating, you see the big chain guns stuck on the sides, which set off the stark black and white paint scheme and make the car look like so much worse than just a car. And the bumper has little mandibles on the sides that point forward. A real police SUV has a very blunt and smooth bumper. That thing looks like it's designed to cause damage, not prevent it. And you see the stepboard and armor bolted and welded onto the side, looking very much like an after the fact edition, and of course barbed wire on the top. Now, the most relevant comparison to vehicles like these would be the cars from Mad Max, and those are pipe buggies. They look like they'd be fun to drive, and for the most part they look practical. These cars look more vicious than that, like someone went out of their way to be nasty when they were making them. Now, a battle tank is actually a more dangerous vehicle. If someone wanted to hurt you with a battle tank, you'd be much more afraid. You would have much more reason to be afraid than if they did with this vehicle, but a battle tank looks deliberate, even professional. Whereas these things with their messed up faces and their stuttering lights and the cold, dark metal bolted onto them and the barbed wire, they don't just look like they could kill you, they look like they want to. They look monstrous. And that got me thinking yesterday. Every culture has monsters that represent its fears, right? And my personal favorite example is the alien from the movie of the same name, the Ridley Scott movie. That alien represents the fear of rape. The creature literally rapes its victims, corrupts their bodies, and ultimately kills them just to reproduce. And its visual design reflects that. It's slim, it's muscular, it's faceless. But it's also smooth and curvy and dripping with fluids. It looks very sexual and not at all in an appealing way. Now, I think these Twisted Metal cars, I think the reason why their design is so memorable is because they do for car crashes, it's going to sound silly, but they do for car crashes what the alien does for rape. They represent what it can do to you. And make no mistake, car crashes they're not just deadly, they are a horror. Now, as an example, I'm going to tell you an anecdote from a police-themed podcast that I listened to, Cop Life, I think it was. And this really happened and it's really grisly, so get ready. What happened was a woman was driving her convertible car just along the highway at cruising speed, and somehow she managed to flip her car, get herself flipped over, and there's no footage of what actually happened, thank God, but the police officer who arrived on the scene found her remains, and her body began at the soles of her feet and ended at her brow. Above that, she was sheared off. So, that's not just deadly, that is a horror. That absolutely deserves a monster to be made out of it. And the closest thing we have is these vehicles from Twisted Metal. They are... I don't want to say they represent the primal fear of being run over, because I'm not sure you can primally fear something that has only been possible in the last 100 or so years. But still, it still speaks to something very deep-seated. And I think that makes it very easy to... That makes the look of these cars really stick in the mind. Every once in a while in this game, everyone gets to drop on you at once and suddenly you're being juggled. I don't know if it would be better or worse in human against human competitive multiplayer, because at least with a bunch of humans, they wouldn't all be going for you, as they do in this game. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's one against many. Anyway, there it is. That red cage up there. If you missed what the subtitles said, you gotta stay inside that red cage, and if you don't, a grace period starts, and mine is ticking down right now. And when the grace period ends, your car starts to fall apart. So that's a way of herding all the vehicles into one small space, and occasionally herding them away from it. It breaks the flow in a way that I think works pretty well. Now, how did that manage to miss? The force cage is also a very video gamey aspect to this video game. They're not at all trying to make this look realistic, and I like that. I think that the more cartoony physics we're dealing with here, they fit the 1990s punk aesthetic that this game goes for, and... well, it fits better with the more psychotic tone this game tries to strike. For example, I just threw napalm at someone. There, I did it again. Would you do that in a realistic game? No, probably not. You'd probably just use tank guns and machine guns. And now we're trying to get out of the force cage. I'm making a break for that hard ground there, and I expect to get there at about Sunday. At the time of recording, it's Thursday. There we go. Yep, and now the grace period is good and worn out, which means I need to high myself there. Luckily, I've got plenty of health, so if it runs out, I'm not going to explode right off the bat. I'm going to use this truck just to deny others the ability to use it, because the NPC drivers, they tend to use this truck a lot more often than they use other health pickups, and that's very bad for you when you're hunting them down, because, well, it's easy for them to slip away from you because you're so busy with everyone else. So denying them health is a good tactic, whether or not you actually need it. You know, like Queen Victoria, that's how she always took baths, you know, at this time, whether I need it or not. I have a zillion missiles, everybody. Oh great, look where we're going. Back to the ice rink. At least I can aim this thing when nobody can move. Hey everybody, follow me! And have a landmine. Problem with being up here is they don't always follow you up here. Humans, being as they are so inclined to camp in one place, you'd probably just inevitably get someone up here in a human-on-human match, but with NPCs, they're a lot more reticent. There. I may be taking a lot of damage, but I'm also doing a lot of damage, and on easy mode, you can get away with being outside the cage for a while. Behind this guy, and that's a good place to be. One of the very well thought out aspects of this game's design is some weapons can fire backwards, but not all of them. So every car has naturally a lot less offensive capability backwards than forwards. But what else is, you're not, getting behind someone is not a get out of getting shot free card. So you want to get behind them, but you still want to be smart about your time while you're there. Whoops! I completely forgot there was an entrance to the subway here. Let's try that again. That's better. You can't feel it on your end, but the controller vibrates in your hands while you take damage from being out of the force cage. The game really will not let you rest about that. They're pretty adamant. Next up is the mid-movie. Now, Twisted Metal Black, which seems to be the Twisted Metal game this one gets most of its inspiration from, there'd be a cutscene where the guy introduces himself and gives you at least some explanation of what his wish was. There'd be an end cutscene where he gets his wish. Spoiler alert, it doesn't exactly work out. And this in the middle, where he gives you some more details. And now let's go over what happened back there. A shirtless guy wearing clown pants with a evil-looking clown mask, a burning head, and a giant machete just waltzed into a hospital. And we're going to see someone try to stop him, but, you know, all this stuff happens in between. Now, to me, that is some of the strongest evidence that this game is not actually real, that it's because a monster popping up and no one reacting to it, at least until it starts wrecking things, that is exactly the sort of thing that would happen in a nightmare, but it doesn't make any sense in real life. And here we see two police officers forgetting how their guns work. Like, I am not a tactician, but I read about this stuff. And apparently you actually don't want to run towards someone when they have a melee weapon and you have a ranged weapon. That is a bit of high-level tactics that I've read somewhere. I can't quite remember where. And the official line on this is the 21-foot rule. It was invented by Officer Denny Tueller, I think his name was, a Utahan police officer who wanted to see exactly how much distance you have on someone with a melee weapon. And what he found out is that if you have a gun that's holstered and someone else has a melee weapon and, well, it's out, if he's within 21 feet of you, he can get to you and strike you before you clear leather, draw a bead, and shoot him. Obviously, everyone is different, but that is the average that police departments use. You're a little safer if your gun is already out, but not much. And what that means is, if there's someone with a melee weapon who is ambiguously deadly, you want to stay far away from them, because if they get close, suddenly it becomes a life or death situation. Suddenly, they have the opportunity to kill you, and you can either accept that risk, which nobody does. Who does that as their... you want to go home that day. So you shoot him. So a lot of shootings that involve melee weapons on one side and ranged weapons on the other, where the police shoot some guy who didn't have a gun, it's because either out of bad tactics or just bad circumstances, they were stuck within the danger zone, and the only way to be safe was to shoot the guy. It's a bad situation. Well, that was a tangent. I want to point out another good bit of writing. Whoever wrote this game really seems to... I think they had the most fun writing Sweet Tooth of all the characters, because the way he put it was not I went crazy or I finally became free even. It was I got him to carve me, I killed him, and then I killed his family. So he considers himself the mask. That's... I wonder how realistic that is, because I don't actually know enough about psychology to know if there are people who pour their entire identity into an article of clothing, but that actually seems like something someone might do. Okay, back to it. And what we've got here... Let's see. Normally, I take the police car. It's one of my favorites. But this time, I'm going to pick this car, which is... This is actually not its ordinary paint scheme. What it usually has is sort of a rust and black color, which, again, makes the car look inhuman, deranged. Having no color where you would expect to have color on an otherwise functioning car. It's kind of like having a walking, talking person with no head. There's just nothing where you expect something. It's expressionless. Now, the reason I have it painted in stars and bars is because, well, I dress like this. I'm one of those people who is so American, it hurts. It's not curable, I'm sorry. Back there, just a couple seconds ago, Calypso commented on Sweet Tooth killing his family, which he just told us about in the cutscene. Now that makes me wonder, was Sweet Tooth telling Calypso about all of this? Was that his monologue to Calypso? Were they talking on the phone or something? It sure didn't look like it. Was Calypso just sitting there being unbelievably patient? Does he do that with all his contestants? Like, does he hold court or like a therapist go, Sweet Tooth, why don't you tell me about how you first became aware that you were criminally insane? And then later on, maybe he'll go, like Axel, last game you were stuck between two wheels. How did that make you feel? I'm making fun, but it actually is a good bit of video game writing. This contest really does have a life of its own. Another thing you'll notice in that intro is the very bleak-looking sky. It's all all awful looking and sick and orange, with big columns of smoke rising crooked into the sky and just melting into everything else. It doesn't disappear like you would hope it would. And normally I'm down on games that spend their enormous budgets on graphics when they could just make a not terribly expensive game, focus on the gameplay, and theoretically just make it much more cheaply and much more tightly and with less pressure. This time, I really think they justified the budget that they spent on the graphics here, because, you know, look what we've... If this game did not have those fancy graphics, if it was just like PlayStation 2 levels of graphics, what would we have? We would have just sort of an orange blur, or maybe a very thin slice of skyline that just repeated all around. That just wouldn't be the same. This game would not look as good. And, you know, again, since this game, unlike some games, really does put a lot of sincere effort into building atmosphere, it paid off. I think it goes to show the importance of art direction, not just how many polygons they had, but what they did with them. Now, if you didn't catch it in the subtitles, that thing's grill is much more vulnerable than the rest of it, so I can do this! Yeah! And this, as a result, this game is very two-tiered. First, I don't know what to do. Ah! That worked. First, it's a race to hunt down that semi-truck before it spawns too many bad guys. You know, other bad guys besides you. And now, it's just a regular old deathmatch. I like that two-tiered way of doing it. It gives you a sense of progress. Okay, I got the pickup truck, no, the semi-truck, now it's time to hunt down everyone else. It's funny, when boss fights are segmented like this, I always wish they would put a checkpoint in the middle, so if you fail a second part, you don't have to redo everything. But here, I don't really resent that losing one part means losing the whole thing. I guess it's just the nature of the thing. The boss fight is one enemy. So, having to fight it in stages and do all the stages over feels... Gotcha. Feels wrong, but here, fighting a whole mob feels like something you should do just all at once. Usually it's not very good to engage some guy head-on while he's, you know, while other guys are wailing on you, but Outlaw does not have a ton of forward offensive capability compared to everything else. Not like some cars where their special weapon fires only forward. His, as of course you know, is a turret. And we're on easy mode. Oof. Yeah, here's another not especially good idea, but I've got... Darn it. I misfired my shotgun. Time to get out of here. We've only got 3 opponents left, so I am still in pretty good shape. Who's shooting at me? I guess Outlaw ducked underneath. Right now I'm driving a vehicle that is even heavier than what Outlaw had. And, well, right now I'm facing the results, which is... I cannot for the life of me catch people who don't want to be caught. Not... or it takes a while, at least. And if I get juggled, I stay juggled. Luckily, that guy's is just as heavy as I am. And I can throw taxis. Why? There is no why. This isn't that kind of game. Power slide, fetch the missile, get back on this guy. Excuse me, cars. Do hope you don't mind the intrusion, because this guy, yes, is about to explode. I rammed that guy. Ramming is one of your best assets when you're heavy like this. And now I'm out of here to go shopping for more weapons. Hit and run. Shopping is a game mechanic that Velocity X, there's that game again, had as well, where you break out of the fight and start running around looking for weapons. In a lot of games, I would say this breaks the flow, but I actually like that there's an ebb and flow to the aggression of fighting. Sometimes you're hounding after them, sometimes you just want some distance to fetch some guns, and of course they're chasing after you because they got nothing else to do. There's a real give and take, a cadence to every fight. Oops. That guy tried to go over the edge, but didn't quite make it. And kablam! There, nice. Yeah, that ice cream truck can transform into a mech. I'm not sure why they thought the ice cream truck was the thing that really needed to be able to do that, but what I do know is if you can jump, you can still ram the thing. It's amazing. Well, ain't you coming down? There we go. Darn it. There is a button to free look up. It's this one. But then you have to look back down again. It is awkward enough that you probably don't want to do it. This game has some extremely complex controls, and for the most part they work, but when the game tries to be three-dimensional, that is one way it just fails. You can jump, though. Boing. Come on, come down, come down, come down. Or... it's a moderately successful shotgun. Luckily, my tow truck can defecate cars, and then fling them, because that's practical. Well, that's Watkins Harbor, that's Juggernaut, that's Roadboat, and that's Junkyard Dog. Now you've seen all those. I would like to go ahead and do Diablo Pass here and show you what races are like, but I'm reaching the end of my 30 minutes, and I've had enough retakes already, so we're going to leave it there. See you next episode.